Hello everybody and welcome back to another video in the 100 tips that only a Grandmaster knows series. This video we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things to do, and hopefully one of yours as well, pushing the H-pawn. Now this applies to the A and the H-pawn, but definitely more prevalent with the H-pawns here. So I've just got a pawn structure on the board here to try to illustrate what I'm talking about. And the tip is, to simplify it for you all, pushing the H-pawn against a fianchetto setup. Now, normally playing H4 against, knight on F6, a pawn on G6, that's going to be ineffective. But there are a couple of situations where pushing that H-pawn is always going to be good, and I'm here to tell you what they are. So first of all, in this position right here, without the pawn on G6, it should be noted that in a lot of positions, pushing the H-pawn here is actually a very good idea, because if you get to H6 and black plays G6, huge weaknesses around the king. So we can see how this would be good for white. Now also, if we get the pawn to H5 and black plays H6, this is also good for white, because without a knight on F6, oftentimes white can bring a queen to D3, get a bishop to C2, and the checkmate threat, if you can't block it with G6 or F5, is actually really, really serious. So even the pawn on H5 is good. And then if black were to stop the H5 move, well, playing H5 yourself, white can blast that open with G4. There's probably going to be a queen or bishop that can target this pawn. G6 will have to get played. And then, a bishop might appear on the dark squares. Obviously, we don't know where the pieces are, so I'm just talking about the general themes. But you can see, no matter how black responds to the H-pawn, you either let it, if you keep it on H4, let it get to H5, let it get to H6, always in some way good for white. And that's with the pawn on G7. So if the pawn is on G6, everything that I'm talking about gets even better. All right. So the pawn goes to H4. Now you can see the H-pawn capturing on G6 is an additional threat to open the H file, to weaken the G6 square, maybe for a sacrifice of some sort, queen, knight, bishop, rook, anything. All right. So now you can see H4, H5 is very effective. So if there was a knight on F6, covering that, obviously H4 wouldn't make as much sense, but anytime that you get that pawn to E5, it feels great because you remove the knight from F6, and suddenly the idea of H4, H5 is so much more powerful. All right, so keep that move in mind. H4 works like magic. Mind you, it works even better if there is not a knight there at all. So let's have a look at what that would look like. So I have a couple examples here, and I even took some from a very famous opening, very popular opening that most of you should recognize. Of course, this is a London system with the white pieces, but this is kind of like a Nimzo setup against it. So we see the pawn going to A4. Now, this is a move that you may have just seen in a bunch of your games or other people's, but you never really understood why they do it. You're like, oh, these GMs just flick A4 out there like it's nobody's business. But we're starting to see the rule and the tip that I'm trying to showcase to you guys develop here. All right, I know some of you are probably wondering, wait a minute, did this guy just have a shot in the middle of his YouTube video? Why, yes. Yes, I did. But it's not the shot that you're thinking of. Magic Mind reached out and said, hey, we're going to send you some product. Try it once a day for a week and see what you think. So we did. And honestly, we loved it. And so that's why Magic Mind is sponsoring today's video. So you can think of it kind of like a productivity booster shot. And it is designed to improve your focus and reduce your stress. The bottom line is that you do not have to change your routine to use it. So if you wake up in the morning, you're a coffee drinker, keep drinking your coffee. Just have the shot along with it. So I'll show you what it looks like. The box that it comes in, like this. It's made with matcha and nootropics. Individual bottle looks like that. It's completely safe. And it's also a pretty nice, small, compact bottle, easy to store and carry. Bring anywhere with you. It's kind of the perfect thing to have right before Title Tuesday. And no, I'm actually not talking about myself. I'm talking about you guys so that you can watch those time scrambles with reduced stress. Sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? So don't forget, guys, check out Magic Mind. That used to work. Check them out. They'll be in the description below the video. You can use the code chessbrah20 for an awesome discount on your first purchase. You can use our link. That's magicmind.com/chessbrah, or use the code chessbrah20 for an awesome discount. The link will also be in the description below. This is the exact same as pushing h4 against the g6 pawn. Basically, if there's no knight there, or if we have control over that square, in this case, we don't have d5, but black has no knight there and no way to get a knight there. Pushing the pawn up the board works really well because how do you respond to it? If you play a5, you concede the b5 square permanently. The same thing would be over here. If you played g6, h5, you would concede the g5 square. So you're starting to see it works on both sides of the board. If you play a6, which is very standard, yes, I can't really push as well because b5 can happen, but you can imagine on the king side, playing h6 and then g5, much weaker for the king. So not sure if that's what you really want to do. Also, that pawn is very easy to target, and suddenly two pieces are tied down to its defense, and I'm just playing queen e2, bishop d3, very normal moves for me. Same thing on the other side of the board as well. All right, so you're starting to see it in action. Flipping the board to the black perspective, it's actually the exact same type of opening, but again, why is this a pawn being flicked up the board? It would be significantly less strong if white did not play that. So if white plays b3, c4, all the same moves, and plays knight c3, look, a5 is a fine move. I'm not saying it's a mistake, but it's definitely not as strong as when the knight's on d2 for the exact reasons that we're beginning to talk about here. All right? So when you're playing against that b3 pawn, g3 pawn, etc., you're starting to push the a or the h pawn against it because, again, if they play a4 here, we get the b4 square. If they play a3, we get to target the a3 pawn and tie some pieces down. Plus, I'm happy to just trade this move for that move. And if you do nothing, I might push the pawn. So let's say here, a4, queen a5, I'm ready to take. Something like this could work just fine. And of course, on the king side, capturing the pawn is pretty much not an option. So that's why it works even better on the other side of the board. Should black play the move h5, h4 here? Absolutely not, right? First of all, there's no follow-up, no backup for that move, but also the knight is on f3. We don't have a pawn on e4 taking the knight away, and it's not like the knight is just over here. So this move does not make sense. So hopefully you're starting to realize what the conditions are. We want the pawn here. We do not want a knight on c3 or f3, or we want our pawn up here for basically the exact same reason. So let's have a look at a position that I get fairly often. I'll show you guys a couple of games here as examples. g6 played. All right, this is in the London system. White played queen b3, c4, queen back to c2. Black just played g6, intending this. White plays the move e4. This is theory. This is also theory that's included in my latest London course that I recently made available. After this, I actually have a decent amount of players who play e6. I don't think it's a very good move. To be honest with you, I don't think it makes a lot of sense, but I do see it from time to time. And this move right here, I immediately play e5 every time. The knight goes back. Okay, I develop my knight, and as soon as black goes here, guess what's coming? I'm sure you already can, given the nature of this video. Yes, it's the move h4, right? We're trying to play h5, and to be honest, black just does not have a good answer. If you play h6, not really sure what happens there. If you play h6, I mean, are you really going to castle? I play h5, g5 happens. There's sacrifices everywhere. That just does not seem smart. So h6 doesn't really solve your problem because I don't think you can castle. And, of course, if I slide my queen over to d2, it'll tie the pieces down. So h6 is playable, but not that desirable. h5, which is what my opponent played, gives up the g5 square. Also allows me to put a ton of pressure on the position, as I'm about to show you. But the prospect of doing nothing was not appealing, because if I get h5, oh my goodness, the position just falls apart. You can never castle. Pieces are very hard to develop over here, and I might even play pawn to h6 to restrict things further. So black just does not have a good answer to this h-pawn push, so it's really well timed now that the knight is not there and we have this fianchetto situation. This is always a decent idea. I showed it to you a few times on the queen side, but it's even better on the king side. So have a look here at what happens if my opponent just goes full defense. You'll notice here that I'm not winning directly from this h4 move, but just this structure and the way the game plays out means that I have an overwhelming advantage, and we're not even 20 moves into the game. At some point, I'll be able to play g4, knight g5, and this is just the ideal structure for us. Lots of weaknesses on the king side for black to deal with, not to mention the queen side is not going any better. So I'll close out this video with another example that went a little bit differently, but it's from the same opening, just because I feel this is like the absolute best example of this h4 pawn push. So we see this e4, e5 again, knight f3, h4, my opponent plays h5, and we're going to see a much more direct approach because my last opponent played knight d8 and just kind of covered everything. Here with bishop h3 and black being oblivious and playing rook b8, b5, did not realize what was about to hit him, which is bishop takes e6. This is all made possible from the h4 move. All right, here we've got queen g6 coming, knight g5. Black's basically got 3 pieces developed, 3.5 if you count this rook, and it was complete destruction. Checkmate was threatened. Knight takes e6, and with that knight hanging over there, that's why I waited until this precise moment in order to play this. I just played this in Title Tuesday earlier this week, so this was kind of fresh on my mind, but I thought this was a great example of exactly what we're talking about in this video. So be sure to remember this h-pawn push, because everything I've showed you doesn't even necessarily feature a castled king. If black's king was here, this move works even better. But you'll notice that I'm ready to play this move regardless, because what you should be looking for is the fianchetto, right? Fianchetto bishop, that's step 1. And then is there a knight on f6? Yes, no? If there's not, it doesn't mean that you go for it right away, because maybe the knight's on d7 waiting to move there. So if you play h4, the knight will return. So a knight has to be gone from f6 and unable to get there as well. Either the knight is just too far away, or you have a pawn there. Obviously, this is best case scenario because it just guards the f6 square and kills any possibility that the knight could return. So h4, h5, I promise you, if you start using this against this formation, I think a lot of us see this and naturally, hey, we've all launched an attack with the h-pawn, but a key ingredient to maybe what a stronger player might do, they might push that h-pawn up the board and have more success than you, or you might feel like, how come when they do it, it works, when I do it, it doesn't? It might be because they're doing it under favorable circumstances. When the knight is not on f6 or cannot get there, the h-pawn push is so much better. And as I mentioned in this video, it applies to the queen side as well, so just depends on what kind of position you have, but be on the lookout for an early a or h-pawn push up the board without a knight there to support the a5 or h5 squares. And of course, this works for white and black depending on which position you get. This is a great tip, and it will make you and your attacks look a lot better because you're just doing them under the best possible circumstances. You're not just chucking the h-pawn up the board for no reason, right? You're finally doing it with purpose and intent. I hope you learned something from the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.